Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're doing something a little different. We're not tackling a huge article or, a dense research paper.
No, instead we're diving into something that might seem quite basic on the surface, but it's actually packed with hidden depths.
Exactly. Our source material today is, believe it or not, excerpts from a dictionary of synonyms and antonyms.
Right. We've got this whole stack of definitions, comparisons, words ranging alphabetically from Pacific right through to puzzle.
And our mission, our deep dive goal today,
Mm.
is to sort of pull out the surprising nuances, the hidden insights that are locked inside words that seem really, really similar.
It's like a linguistic treasure hunt, really, showing just how precise and, well, powerful language can be when you look closely.
Think of it like those paint sample cards.
Mhm.
You see a whole row of blues and they look almost the same, but each one is just slightly different. Each has its own feel.
That's a great analogy, and these word nuances are just like that. Choosing Pacific over peaceable isn't just a stylistic choice. It actually changes the meaning, sometimes subtly, sometimes quite significantly.
And understanding this stuff isn't just for, writers or word nerds. It helps you be clear in your own communication, understand the subtext in what you read and hear.
And just generally have a sharper grasp on things because language is how we frame everything, right?
Absolutely. It's amazing how much you can learn just by asking why we have 5, 6, 7 different ways to say almost the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Each word has its own job to do.
Okay, so we've got this stack. Definitions from Pacific to puzzle. Ready to unpack it.
Yeah, let's dive in.
All right, let's kick things off with something we all kind of seek. Peace and quiet. We've got this cluster of words. Pacific, peaceable, peaceful, irenic, pacifist, and pacifistic.
Okay, so the core idea connecting all of these is obviously affording or promoting peace. But the way they do that, or the context, that's where the differences lie.
So let's start with Pacific. What's the deal with that one?
Right. Pacific usually applies to people, or maybe their actions, words, ideas, things that tend to actively maintain peace or conciliate strife to try and smooth things over.
Actively maintain peace. Okay.
Yeah, the example given is adopted a Pacific attitude at the conference. It suggests someone is taking steps, making an effort to keep things calm or resolve disagreements.
So it's proactive. Not just passively being quiet, but working towards peace.
Yeah,
And the antonym listed is bellicose.
exactly. Bellicose meaning warlike or hostile. So Pacific is the direct opposite, actively trying to prevent that hostility.
Makes sense. Okay, how does that contrast with peaceable?
Peaceable is a bit different. It stresses the enjoyment of peace as a way of life, or it might imply someone just doesn't have any intention of being aggressive.
So it's more of a state of being, a personal disposition.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
the example, a peaceable gathering. The gathering itself isn't actively making peace. It just is non-aggressive. It's characterized by an absence of aggression.
So I'm peaceable. I live a peaceable life. It's inherent. And the antonyms reflect that. Contentious, acrimonious, things that describe argumentativeness and bitterness, the opposite of just getting along.
Right. It's about their nature rather than their actions necessarily.
Okay, what about peaceful? Seems pretty close.
It is close, but peaceful often suggests something broader. It's the absence not just of strife or contention, but also of all disturbing influences. Think peaceful solitude.
So it's the deeper calm, free from any disruption, not just human conflict. Like a quiet lake could be peaceful.
Exactly. It's about the overall atmosphere of tranquility.
Got it. Now, irenic sounds a bit more specialized.
It is. Irenic is often used in the context of religious controversy. It describes attitudes or measures that are likely to allay disputes, particularly theological ones.
Okay, so trying to make peace between different religious viewpoints.
Yeah, the example is issued an irenic interpretation of the canon, trying to find common ground, essentially, in a religious debate. Its antonym is acrimonious, again, highlighting the bitterness it tries to overcome.
Interesting. And pacifist. That one feels more common.
Right. Pacifist, used as an adjective, stresses opposition, especially active opposition, to war or violence. And usually this opposition is on moral or conscientious grounds.
So it's a principled stance against violence.
Yes. Like a pacifist group on the campus. They actively oppose violence based on their beliefs. The antonym is combative.
Right. Ready or eager to fight. So pacifist is a strong, active stance. What about pacifistic then?
Very close to pacifist, but the source notes it usually applies only to things, not people. So you might talk about a determinedly pacifistic outlook.
Ah, so the outlook itself embodies pacifism. The person holding it as a pacifist, their viewpoint might be described as pacifistic. It's a subtle one.
It is, yeah. Often used fairly interchangeably in practice, but there's that slight distinction in formal usage.
So why does this matter for you listening? Well, think about it. If you say someone is avoiding conflict, are they just naturally quiet and non-aggressive? Peaceable? Are they actively trying to mediate? Pacific? Do they have deep moral reasons for rejecting violence? Pacifist? Or are you just describing a calm scene? Peaceful?
Choosing the right word paints a much clearer picture. It tells you about their character, their actions, or the environment itself. It shows how we perceive peace in different ways as a state, an action, a principle, or an atmosphere.
Language gives you that precision. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Related, but different. Words for soothing anger. We've got pacify, appease, placate, mollify, propitiate, conciliate.
Right, all of these mean basically to ease or quiet someone's anger or disturbance, but how you do it and the implications. That's the key.
Let's start with pacify. Seems like the most straightforward.
It is pretty general. Pacify suggests just smoothing things over, calming someone down, or maybe quelling an uprising or disturbance. Like a sincere apology seemed to pacify his rage.
Just bringing things back to calm. Simple enough. Antonym, anger.
Yep. Now, appease. This one's interesting. It implies quieting agitation or demands by making concessions. And importantly, it often carries a negative connotation.
Ah, right. Appeasement. Like giving in to demands to avoid conflict, but maybe making things worse in the long run.
Exactly. The example hits this. Nothing seemed to appease their appetite for territorial expansion. It often implies weakness or feeding bad behavior. The antonym, exasperate, fits that trying to appease might just make the demander more irritated if it doesn't work.
Okay, so appease is about giving concessions, often viewed negatively. What about placate?
Placate suggests changing resentment or bitterness to goodwill. It's more about shifting the underlying emotion. Example, bought flowers to placate his irate wife.
So you're trying to actively win them over, turn their anger into friendliness, maybe with a gesture.
Yes, precisely. It's about transforming the negative feeling. The antonym is enrage, the opposite of successfully placating someone.
Got it. And mollify, how's that different?
Mollify implies softening anger or soothing hurt feelings by taking positive action. Like, a promise of a hearing mollified the demonstrators. It focuses on actions that address the cause of the anger or hurt, showing you're taking their feelings seriously.
Okay, so mollify is about soothing through action, maybe by addressing the grievance, while placate might be more about a gesture to change their mood. Is this fair?
That's a really good way to put it. Mollify also shares exasperate as an antonym.
Right. Now, propitiate. That sounds a bit formal.
It is. Propitiate implies averting anger or malevolence or trying to win favor, especially from someone powerful. The dictionary example here is just perfect. Propitiated his mother-in-law by getting the clean-cut look.
Huh. That really nails it. It's about managing someone who has power over you, trying to stay on their good side.
Exactly. The power dynamic is key to propitiate. You're trying to gain favor or avoid displeasure from someone influential.
Okay. And the last one, conciliate.
Conciliate suggests ending an estrangement by using persuasion, making concessions, or settling differences. Think America's efforts to conciliate the colonies. It implies bringing two separated or hostile parties back together.
So it's about reconciliation, bridging a gap, ending a state of being opposed or apart.
Precisely. Restoring harmony after a break.
Okay, so for you listening, this is super useful. When someone's trying to calm things down, which word fits? Are they just trying to quiet the noise, pacify? Are they giving in, perhaps problematically, appease, trying to win over someone bitter, placate, taking action to soothe hurt feelings, mollify, trying to please someone powerful, propitiate, or aiming to reconcile estranged parties, conciliate?
The word choice tells you so much about the strategy and the dynamics of the situation. It's far more than just calming down.
Definitely. Okay, let's completely switch gears. How about describing agreeable tastes and textures? We have palatable, appetizing, savory, tasty, toothsome.
Right. All ways of saying food is good, but each focuses on a different aspect of that goodness.
Let's start with palatable. Sounds a bit minimal.
It often is. Palatable frequently applies to something you find agreeable, maybe unexpectedly so. Or it can just mean not unpleasant. Like surprised to find Indian food quite palatable. It sort of sets the bar at acceptable.
So if you call something palatable, you're not exactly singing its praises. It's okay, maybe better than you thought, but not amazing. Antonyms. unpalatable, distasteful.
Exactly. It clears the not bad hurdle. Now, appetizing suggests it whets the appetite. And importantly, it can apply to the aroma and appearance, not just the taste.
So it looks good or smells good, makes you want to eat it.
Yes, like select from a cart filled with appetizing desserts. They draw you in visually. Antonyms are disgusting, nauseating.
Makes sense. What about savory?
Savory applies to both taste and aroma, and it usually suggests piquancy, often spiciness. It's generally used for things that aren't sweet. Think egg rolls filled with various savory fillings.
Right, the opposite of sweet. Flavorful, maybe salty or herby or spicy.
Yeah.
Its antonym is bland.
Exactly. Tasty is pretty straightforward. It implies a pronounced and, well, appetizing taste. The dictionary uses a negative example. Stale shrimp that were far from tasty. Basically, it means it has a distinct, enjoyable flavor.
So the flavor is noticeable and good, also has bland as an antonym, like savory.
Right. And finally, toothsome. This one stresses agreeableness, but sometimes implies tenderness or lusciousness as well.
So it's about the texture, too. Delightful to eat.
Yes, exactly. The example is a dazzling array of toothsome hors d'oeuvre. It suggests something pleasant to bite into, maybe tender, succulent, rich. It engages the mouthfeel.
That's a great word. So for you listening, next time you describe food, think, is it just okay, palatable? Does it look or smell great, appetizing? Is it flavorful and not sweet, savory? Does it have a clear, good flavor, tasty? Or is it delicious in both flavor and texture, toothsome?
It adds a whole layer of sensory detail to your description. Culinary precision, as you said.
Absolutely. Okay, now let's pivot to words describing a lack of color or vitality, but more in an abstract sense. We'll look at pale, anemic, and bloodless.
Right. These all suggest weakness, a lack of substance or vigor, almost as if drained of blood, but they apply this idea metaphorically in different ways.
So pale itself, when used abstractly.
In that sense, pale stresses a lack of color, character, vigor, force, or energy. It can also imply something fails to measure up to a standard or type. The classic example is a pale imitation of the original.
So weak, lacking force, maybe a poor copy of something better. Its antonym is brilliant.
Exactly. Something vibrant, full of life and character. Then there's anemic. This implies a deficiency in the elements that contribute to, say, intellectual or spiritual vigor or richness.
Like the example given. The anemic support of the arts in this country. That really hits home.
It does, doesn't it? Anemic support isn't just weak. It lacks the necessary substance, the richness, lifeblood to truly nourish something. It feels fundamentally inadequate.
Yeah, inadequate is a good word for it. The antonyms listed are full-blooded and florid, which suggests that robustness, it's lacking.
Precisely. And finally, bloodless. This suggests the absence of qualities like vitality, lifelikeness. The example is presented a bloodless portrait of the great national hero.
So a bloodless portrayal might be technically correct, but it lacks passion, personality, the spark of life. It feels sterile or drained.
Exactly. It's technically there, but the life is missing. Its antonyms, sanguine and plethoric, emphasize that missing vitality and abundance.
Got it. So for you, the listener, these are really useful metaphorical tools. When describing something lacking an argument, a creative work, political support, you can be specific. Is it just weak compared to something else? Pale? Does it lack fundamental richness or vigor? Anemic? Or is it completely devoid of life and vitality? Bloodless.
They really sharpen your critique. Instead of just saying it's weak, you can diagnose how it's weak.
Definitely adds more punch.
Yeah.
Okay, let's switch again. How about words for correspondence or resemblance? We have parallel, counterpart, analog, correlate.
Okay, these all mean something corresponds to or resembles something else, but the type of correspondence is different for each.
Let's start with parallel.
Parallel implies that two things are so similar that their lack of divergence suggests, parallel lines. They run alongside each other. The example is drew a parallel between their experiences.
So very similar in their course or characteristics, like two similar life stories running side by side.
Exactly. Similar trajectories or natures. Now, counterpart suggests a complementary relationship, sometimes even an opposite or obverse one, like gave the balls to her counterpart on the other team.
So it highlights a matching role or function, but in a different context or system, like the U.S. president and their counterpart, the Prime Minister of Canada.
Perfect example. Same kind of job, different place. They correspond functionally.
Okay. What about analog?
Analog usually implies a more remote likeness. It's often used when making a comparison to clarify or explain something, drawing on a similar function or relationship in a different domain.
So using something familiar to explain something less familiar, based on a similar underlying principle.
Exactly. The example is saw faith in technology as an analog to earlier beliefs in supernatural forces. The belief systems are very different, but the function of faith in something powerful is seen as analogous. It's about functional similarity.
Interesting. And correlate.
Correlate applies to things that correspond from another point of view, or in another order of viewing. It often implies a mutual relationship or connection, frequently statistical. Think debated whether higher interest rates are a correlate of economic prosperity.
Okay, so two things that tend to occur together or vary together, even if one doesn't necessarily cause the other, they're linked in some observable way.
Precisely. It's about that mutual relationship or statistical connection.
So for you listening, these are great for making precise comparisons. Are you highlighting strong similarity in nature or development? Parallel. A matching role in a different setting, counterpart. A functional similarity for explanation, analog. Or a mutual, often statistical relationship, correlate.
It really helps you refine how you connect different ideas or things. You move beyond just saying it's similar to.
Absolutely. Okay, let's perhaps visit a less savory group of words. Those describing people who cling to others or flatter them. Parasite, sycophant, toady, hanger-on, leech, sponge. Quite the collection.
Ah, yes. They all describe someone who relies on others in an obsequious or exploitative way, but each pinpoints a particular flavor of that behavior.
Let's start with the most general one. Parasite.
Parasite applies broadly to someone who clings to a person of wealth, power, or influence, or someone just seen as useless to society, living off others. The example is a jet setter with the usual entourage of parasites. It's a basic idea of dependence without contribution.
Just feeding off the host, basically.
Pretty much. Now, sycophant has a very specific element: fawning, flattery, or adulation. Like a military dictator who would only listen to sycophants.
Ah, so a sycophant gets what they want by sucking up, by using excessive praise. Flattery is their tool.
Exactly, that's their method. Toady is even more specific. It emphasizes servility and snobbery.
Servility and snobbery, how does that work? Seems contradictory.
It's about hierarchy. The toady is incredibly submissive and fawning towards those they see as superior. That's servility. But they might be dismissive or cruel to those they perceive as beneath them. That's the snobbery. They play up to power. The example the president's own toady made others grovel captures that.
Wow. Okay, so they kiss up and kick down. That's a very particular and unpleasant type. What about hanger-on?
Hanger-on is usually contemptuous. It refers to someone who just habitually keeps company with others or depends unduly on them for favors. Kept tripping on or hangers-on. It stresses their persistent presence and reliance.
I'm just always there, hoping to benefit from the association.
Exactly. They just sort of attach themselves. Leech is a much stronger, more negative term. It stresses persistence and clinging to someone and bleeding them for one's own advantage.
Like a literal bloodsucker, draining resources.
That's the image. The example leeches who abandoned her when the money ran out highlights that exploitative, draining aspect.
Very visceral. And the last one, sponge.
Sponge stresses parasitic laziness, dependence, opportunism, and pettiness. It's about cadging or mooching. Think her brother, a shiftless sponge, often came by for a free meal.
The person who's always trying to get free stuff, avoid paying their share, lives off others' generosity because they're lazy or opportunistic.
Exactly. The emphasis is on getting things for free, often shamelessly.
Okay, this is a useful, if somewhat depressing, set of distinctions for you listening. When describing someone exploitative, you can be precise. Are they just generally dependent, parasite? Do they use flattery, sycophant? Are they servile to superiors and nasty to inferiors, toady? Do they just hang around hoping for benefits, hanger-on? Are they actively draining resources, leech? Or are they lazily mooching, sponge?
Each word really hits a different nerve, describes a different strategy of dependence, powerful tools for social observation, perhaps.
Indeed. Okay, moving to a more formal sphere. Forgiveness and release from penalty. We have pardon, amnesty, absolution.
Right. All involve lifting a penalty, but they differ significantly in context. Who grants it, who receives it, and what exactly is being forgiven.
Let's start with pardon. Seems common in legal contexts.
It is. A pardon denotes a release from the penalty imposed by an authority, but usually not from the guilt itself. The example is received a pardon from the governor at the last moment. The governor cancels the sentence, but the conviction often still stands.
So you're out of jail, or the fine is canceled, but you're still technically considered guilty of the crime. The punishment is gone, not the finding of guilt. The antonym is punishment.
Correct. That's the key legal distinction. Now, Amnesty implies a pardon extended to a whole class or community of people.
Ah, so it's a group thing, not individual.
Exactly, like declared an amnesty for all tax evaders or maybe for political prisoners after a conflict. It's a broad act of forgiveness for a category of offense or offenders.
Okay, and absolution. That sounds religious.
It is, primarily. In ecclesiastical use, especially Roman Catholic, absolution is a pardon for sins that have been confessed and atoned for. Crucially, it implies the eternal punishment for sin has been removed.
So it's about spiritual forgiveness, granted by the church, dealing with sin and its consequences in the afterlife. Example, asked for and was granted absolution.
Precisely. It's a religious concept, distinct from legal or political forgiveness. Its antonym is condemnation.
So for you, the listener, these are clearly not interchangeable. A presidential pardon affects an individual's legal sentence. A government amnesty applies to a group. A priest grants absolution for sins. Understanding the context, legal, political, religious, is crucial.
Using the wrong term could lead to major misunderstandings about what's actually being forgiven and by whom.
Absolutely. Okay, let's break things down literally now. Words for parts of a whole. Part, portion, piece, member, division, section, segment, fragment.
Right. They all mean something less than the whole, but they highlight different aspects: how the part relates to the whole, how it was separated, or its function.
Let's start with part, the basic one.
Yeah, part is the most general. You use it when you don't need to be specific, just indicating not the whole thing, like they ran only part of the way. It's indefinite. Antonym, whole.
Just the default word for not all. Okay, how about portion?
Portion implies an assigned or allotted part. Like, cut the pie into 6 portions. It suggests a specific share, a measured amount that's been intentionally divided or set aside.
Like a serving size or your share of the winnings. It's a specific quantity.
Exactly. Piece stresses separateness. It applies to a separate or detached part of a whole, a puzzle with 500 pieces. It highlights that it's a distinct unit, broken off, or made to be separate.
Okay, so a piece feels more distinct and separate than just a part or a portion.
Generally, yes. Member suggests one of the functional units that make up a body or a system. An arm is a bodily member. It emphasizes the part's role within the integrated whole.
Like a team member or a structural member in building. It's defined by its function.
Precisely. Division applies to a large or diversified part, often made as if by cutting. Think the manufacturing division of the company. It implies a major, formal subdivision of something complex.
Like splitting a large organization into big chunks?
Yes. Section is similar, but usually applies to a relatively smaller or more uniform part. The entertainment section of the newspaper. Still a formal subdivision, but often smaller or more consistent in nature than a division.
Like chapters in a book or sections in a store.
Right. Segment applies to a part that's separated or marked out, perhaps by natural lines of cleavage or definition, the retired segment of the population. It often suggests a part defined by natural characteristics or boundaries.
Like market segments or segments of an orange. There's a sort of natural or logical breaking point.
Exactly. Finally, fragment. This applies to a part that's produced by breaking or shattering or something left over after the rest is gone. Only a fragment of the play still exists.
So a broken piece, an incomplete remnant, often implies damage or loss.
Yes, that sense of incompleteness or being broken is key to fragment.
Okay, so for you listening, next time you say part, pause a second. Is it just any bit? Part.
A specific share portion.
A separate unit, piece.
Yeah.
A functional component member. A large subdivision, a smaller one, section, a naturally defined part segment, or a broken remnant fragment.
It's amazing how many ways we have to conceptualize part of a whole. Shows the complexity we perceive.
Definitely. Let's stick with smallness, but focus now on tiny amounts or insignificant pieces. Particle, bit, mite, smidgen, whit, atom, iota, jot, title.
Okay, all these mean a very small amount, but they carry different weights of smallness, different formalities, and different typical uses.
Let's start with particle.
Particle implies an amount that's still, theoretically at least, within the range of perception, even if it's tiny, like a rumor without a particle of truth. You could, in theory, detect that tiny bit of truth if it were there.
Okay. A minimal perceivable amount. What about bit?
Bit suggests the least feasible amount or degree. It's often very informal, a movie that was a bit too violent. It's just our common way of saying a little.
Yeah, very common, very general, small amount.
Right. Mite stresses either smallness in size or minuteness in amount. Doesn't have a mite of suspicion. It emphasizes extreme smallness, often used for abstract things like suspicion or sense.
A tiny, tiny trace, even smaller feeling than bit.
Yeah, it feels smaller. And smidgen might go even further in stressing that minuteness or scarcity left them without even a smidgen of hope. It's informal and really pushes the idea of absolute minimum, almost nothing.
Like barely a speck, barely a hint. Even smaller than might, maybe.
It often feels that way, yeah.
Yeah.
It emphasizes extreme scarcity. Now, wit is interesting because it's used mostly in negative phrases. It implies the least conceivable amount. I cared not a whit about their opinion.
Right, you only ever hear not a whit. You would say, I have a whit of interest. It means none at all, essentially.
Exactly. It emphasizes utter lack of concern or amount. Adam draws on the scientific idea, even if outdated scientifically, of an indivisible unit to suggest the very smallest amount possible. Not an atom of dust escaped his attention.
So the absolute minimum possible quantity.
Yes. Then we have iota and jot. They're used pretty much interchangeably to mean the smallest detail or amount, often for abstract things. Tried to remove the last iota of doubt or added not a jot to their knowledge.
The tiniest possible detail or quantity of something abstract like doubt or knowledge.
Exactly. And title means the same, but it's almost exclusively used in the phrase jot or title. Didn't care a jot or title about the opinions of others.
So title basically lives inside that one phrase.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so for you listening, when you want to say a tiny bit, you've got options. Is it a minimal but detectable amount? Particle? A casual small amount? Bit. Extremely tiny scarce amount? Might? Smidgen? Absolutely none, not a whit. The smallest possible unit? Atom. The smallest abstract detail? Iota, jot. Or are you using that specific phrase? Jot or title?
It just shows the incredible granularity of English, even when talking about almost nothing.
Huh. Very true. Okay, let's look at associates, people who work or join together. Partner, co-partner, colleague, ally, confederate.
Right. All mean an associate, but they specify the nature of the association, business, profession, common cause, etc.
Starting with partner.
Partner typically implies an associate in business or one of a pair in games, dance, or marriage. Now, all change partners. It focuses on a shared activity or enterprise, often implying some equality in the relationship. Antonym, rival.
Okay, someone you're joined with for a specific activity. What about co-partner?
Co-partner can just mean the same as partner, or it can specifically highlight that someone is a fellow partner among a group of partners. Like the actions of one partner may commit his or her co-partners. It emphasizes the relationship between the partners themselves.
Ah, so if there are 3 partners in a firm, they are co-partners with each other.
Exactly. Colleague usually applies to an associate in the same office, profession, or academic field. Presented a lecture to her colleagues. It's about a shared professional context.
People you work with in the same line of work or at the same institution.
Right. Ally suggests an association, often temporary, for a common cause. Agreed to act as allies for the duration of the conflict. This implies joining forces for a specific goal, often against an opponent. Antonym, adversary.
Like nations forming an alliance for war, or groups becoming allies for a campaign, the association is often strategic and might not last.
Precisely. And Confederates often suggests a closer or perhaps more permanent union for strength and solidarity. Joined his Confederates in a toast to the new undertaking. It can sometimes imply plotting or joint action, maybe with a slightly more tight-knit or even secretive feel than ally. Also has adversary as an antonym.
Yeah, it feels a bit like a closer bond, maybe for mutual support or a shared venture that's not necessarily as formal or temporary as an alliance.
That's a good way to capture the feel.
So for you, the listener, these words help define the relationship precisely. Are they joined in a business or activity? Partner, co-partner. Professionals in the same field? Colleague. Teaming up for a specific, maybe temporary cause? Ally. Or united in a closer bond for strength?
Each term puts a specific label on the nature of the connection.
Definitely. Okay, let's shift to intense emotions that compel action. Passion, fervor, ardor, enthusiasm, zeal.
Right. These all describe strong feelings that drive behavior, but they differ in the quality, steadiness, and focus of that emotion.
Let's start with passion.
Passion applies to an emotion that's deeply stirring, maybe even ungovernable. Developed a passion for reading. It suggests a powerful, perhaps overwhelming feeling or interest that strongly motivates.
Like an intense, maybe all-consuming drive, powerful stuff.
Yeah. Fervor, on the other hand, implies a warm and steady emotion. Read the poem aloud with great fervor. It suggests intensity and heartfelt feeling, but perhaps more controlled and consistent than passion.
Like a constant warm glow of feeling rather than a sudden fire.
Good analogy. Then ardor. Ardor suggests warm and excited feeling, but it's likely to be fitful or short-lived. The ardor of their honeymoon soon faded.
Ah, so intense excitement, but maybe it burns brightly and then fades quickly. Antonyms: coolness, indifference.
Exactly. It captures that potentially fleeting intensity. Enthusiasm applies to a lively or eager interest in, or admiration for, something specific, a proposal, a cause, an activity. Never showed much enthusiasm for sports.
So, positive excitement directed towards a particular thing,
Mm,
maybe less deep than passion or fervor. Antonym: apathy.
often, yeah. It's more about eager interest. Finally, zeal. Zeal implies energetic and unflagging pursuit of an aim or devotion to a cause. Preaches with the zeal of the converted.
Right. That sounds like sustained, energetic, maybe even relentless dedication, like a zealot.
Yeah.
Also has apathy as an antonym.
It does. It stresses that persistent energy towards a goal.
So for you listening, when describing someone's motivation, you can be specific. Is it a powerful, maybe overwhelming feeling, passion? A warm, steady emotion?
Fervor.
Intense but possibly short-lived excitement, ardor? Lively interest in something specific,
Enthusiasm. Yeah.
or energetic, tireless dedication to a cause, zeal.
Each word paints a different picture of their inner fire, so to speak, different kinds of intense feeling.
Great distinctions. Now, for something related to art and emotion, qualities that move us to pity or sorrow. We have pathos, poignancy, bathos.
Okay, these describe the quality in something that evokes sadness or pity, but they differ in the type of emotion, its perceived genuineness, and its artistic effect.
Let's start with pathos. Sounds quite literary.
It often is. Pathos usually suggests the arousal of an aesthetic response rather than a deeply personal one. It's a quality in a work of art or a situation that's designed to evoke pity or sadness in the audience, often felt with a bit of distance. Example, a drama more noted for its pathos than its plot.
So it's the sadness-evoking quality within the thing itself, maybe appreciated intellectually or artistically.
That's a good way to put it. Now, poignancy is often preferred when you want to stress the genuineness of the emotion evoked and its sharpness. Felt the full poignancy of their last days together.
Ah, so poignancy feels more real, more deeply felt, more piercing than pathos.
Exactly. It implies a sharper, more sincere, and perhaps more personal emotional impact. It really hits you.
That's a powerful difference. What about bathos? That sounds less good.
It is. Bathos is often applied to a false or pretentious attempt at pathos. It implies a kind of maudlin sentimentality that ends up being ridiculous or contemptible rather than moving. It's like aiming for tragedy but landing in unintentional comedy or just mush.
So it's a failed attempt at evoking deep sadness, coming across as clumsy, overly sentimental, or just plain silly.
Precisely. The example could not tell the story of his last failed romance without descending into bathos captures that awkward failed attempt at seriousness.
Okay, so for you, the listener, this is super useful for critique. Is a film trying too hard and becoming ridiculous? Bathos. Does it have an artistic quality that evokes sadness? Pathos. Or does it genuinely touch you with a sharp, sincere, emotional impact? Poignancy.
It really helps distinguish effective emotional resonance from manipulation or artistic failure.
Definitely. Okay, let's look at temporary stops. Pause, recess, respite, lull, intermission.
Right. Always to say a break, but differing in context, duration, and the feeling associated with the stop.
Let's start simple. Pause.
Pause just stresses the fact of stopping, usually with the expectation of starting again soon. Spoke during a pause in the music. It's a brief halt.
Simple stop and start. What about recess?
Recess implies a temporary suspension of work or activity, often scheduled or official, children playing during the morning school recess, or a court taking a recess.
Okay, a formal break in proceedings or work?
Yes. Respite is different because it implies the break brings relief from something difficult, like work, pain, or conflict. Enjoyed the brief respite between attacks. The key is that sense of welcome relief.
Ah, so it's a break that feels good because it stops something hard.
Exactly. Lull implies a temporary stop, or more often, a marked decline in activity or intensity. The storm strengthened again after a lull. It's a quiet period, but things might flare up again.
Like a quiet spell in the middle of something busy or intense. A dip in activity.
Precisely. An intermission implies a scheduled break in continuity, especially one that allows time for some other activity. No one should work day after day without intermission. Think of the interval in a play or movie.
A planned break.
Mhm.
Often between parts of something, allowing people to do something else before resuming.
Yes.
So for you listening, when describing a break, think about its nature. A simple stop, pause. A scheduled work break, recess. A welcome relief, respite. A dip in intensity, lull. Or a planned interval, Their mission.
Using the right word adds clarity about why the break is happening and what it feels like.
Okay, let's talk money, or rather giving it. Pay, compensate, remunerate, satisfy, reimburse, indemnify, repay, recompense. Lots of ways to give someone money.
Yes. And they all have specific contexts and implications about why the money is being given.
Let's start with pay, the most basic.
Pay just implies discharging an obligation you've incurred. We pay taxes, you owe it, you give the money. Very general.
Simple transaction. Okay, compensate.
Compensate implies counterbalancing services rendered or help given. An attorney well compensated for her services. It focuses on payment that matches the value of the contribution or work done.
So, fair payment for work or services.
Yes. Remunerate also suggests paying for services, but it can imply payment that's generous or perhaps not strictly contracted for. Promise to remunerate the searchers handsomely. It often carries a sense of reward or generosity beyond basic compensation.
So maybe more than just fair payment, possibly a bonus or generous reward.
Could be, yeah. Satisfy implies paying what is demanded or required by law. All creditors will be satisfied in full. This is about fulfilling a formal or legal financial obligation completely.
Meeting the legal requirements of a debt.
Exactly. Reimburse is specific. It implies returning money that someone else spent for your benefit. The company will reimburse employees for expenses incurred, paying back out-of-pocket costs.
Covering expenses someone fronted for you.
Yes. Indemnify implies making good on a loss, injury, or damage suffered, often promised beforehand, like insurance. The government cannot indemnify the families of military casualties. It's about covering losses.
Like an insurance payout or compensation for damages.
Right. Repay stresses, paying back an equivalent amount, usually of something borrowed. Repay a loan, simple return of what was lent.
Paying back a debt. Straightforward.
Yes. And finally, recompense. This suggests a due return, which could be making amends for something wrong, a friendly repayment, or a reward. The hotel recompensed us with a free bottle of champagne.
So it can be making up for a mistake or providing a reward or return. Feels like balancing the scales somehow.
That's a good way to think of it, a due return.
So for you, the listener, navigating financial talk requires precision. Are you just fulfilling an obligation? Pay. Matching a contribution, compensate, remunerate. Meeting a legal demand, satisfy. Covering expenses, reimburse. Making good on losses, indemnify. Returning a loan, repay. Or making amends, rewarding, recompense.
Each word defines the specific nature of the financial exchange. Very useful in business and legal contexts.
Definitely. Okay, let's look at words describing people maybe a bit too focused on learning. Pedantic, academic, scholastic, bookish. These often carry a negative edge.
They often do. They critique different ways of engaging with knowledge, suggesting it might be too narrow, theoretical, formal, or detached.
Starting with pedantic.
Pedantic implies showing off learning, often minor details, in a dull or stodgy way. It can suggest someone is absorbed in trivial scholarly points and misses the bigger picture. Gave an infuriatingly pedantic discourse on the matter.
So someone who makes a big deal of knowing obscure facts or rules, often annoyingly so.
Exactly. Academic tends to stress abstractness, a lack of practical experience. The Economist's concerns seemed more academic than practical. It suggests ideas that might work in theory, but are disconnected from reality.
The classic ivory tower critique. Good on paper, not in practice.
Yes. Scholastic implies excessive formalism. Adherence to the letter of rules, maybe dryness, or overly subtle distinctions, presented a hopelessly scholastic argument. It suggests getting lost in the technicalities and rigid structure of an argument.
Like focusing too much on the rules of logic and not enough on the substance.
Precisely. And bookish suggests learning derived purely from books, not from life experience. Had about him an effete, bookish air. It can imply someone knowledgeable, but perhaps socially awkward or lacking practical wisdom.
Knows a lot from reading, but maybe not much about the real world.
That's the usual connotation.
So for you listening, these words help critique how knowledge is used or presented. Is someone annoyingly showing off minor details? Pedantic. Are their ideas impractical? Academic. Is their reasoning overly formal and rigid? Scholastic. Or is their knowledge purely theoretical, lacking real-world grounding? Bookish.
They allow for nuanced criticism of intellectual styles.
Okay, let's look at persevere versus persist. You mentioned this has a key distinction.
It really does. Both mean continuing despite difficulty, but the connotation is usually opposite.
So, Persevere.
Persevere implies admirable determination. It suggests steadfastly pursuing a goal despite obstacles, refusing to be discouraged. It's seen positively, persevered doggedly in his efforts to get good grades.
So sticking with it in a good way. Grit, determination.
Exactly. Now, persist. Persist often suggests a disagreeable quality. It stresses stubbornness more than courage. It can imply continuing something despite advice, disapproval, or even knowing it's wrong. The infuriating teasing that persisted despite all her attempts to stop it.
So persist is the stubborn, maybe annoying or wrong-headed continuation, like persisting in a bad habit or annoying behavior. Its antonym is desist.
Precisely. The connotation is often negative, emphasizing unwelcome stubbornness.
Wow. Okay, so for you, the listener, this choice is crucial. Are you praising someone's determination, persevere, or criticizing their stubbornness,
Right.
persist? The word choice completely flips the judgment.
It's a stark example of how connotation shapes meaning. One word signals admiration, the other often signals annoyance.
Language is powerful. Okay, let's look at ways of viewing things. Phase, aspect, side, facet, angle.
Right. These all describe a particular way something can be seen or presented, but each highlights a different kind of perspective or dimension.
Starting with phase.
Phase implies a stage in a process of change or development, often without reference to an observer. The second phase of the investigation. It's about a distinct period in something's evolution.
Like stages of construction or phases of the moon, a step in a sequence.
Exactly. Aspect stresses the particular point of view of an observer, limiting what's being considered. An article that considers the financial aspect of divorce. It's about looking at something from one specific dimension or perspective.
Like the legal aspect, the social aspect, the historical aspect, a particular viewpoint.
Yes. Side stress is one of several possible viewpoints, often implying that other, potentially opposing views exist, a broadcast that told only one side of the story.
Like two sides to every story, or different sides in a debate. It acknowledges multiplicity and potential disagreement.
Precisely. Facet implies one of many sides or dimensions, often suggesting complexity, like the facets of a gemstone. Explores the many facets of life in New York City. It suggests multiple interconnected characteristics.
So, the many different dimensions of a complex issue or personality.
Yes. And angle suggests a very specific, perhaps restricted point of view, often chosen strategically. Find a fresh angle for covering the political convention.
Like approaching a problem from a new angle, or a journalist finding a unique angle for a story. A deliberate perspective.
Exactly, a chosen viewpoint.
So, for you listening, these words help clarify perspective. Is it a stage, phase, a general viewpoint, aspect, one of several viewpoints, side, one dimension of a complex whole, facet, or a specific chosen perspective, angle?
They give you the tools to dissect how something is being presented or analyzed.
Great tools indeed. Okay, let's consider words for things that seem true. Plausible, credible, believable, colorable, specious.
These all relate to apparent truthfulness, but they differ on the basis for that appearance and whether it's genuine or deceptive.
Let's start with plausible.
Plausible implies something seems reasonable or genuine at first glance, but often with a hint that it might actually be deceptive, a plausible excuse. It sounds like it could be true, but you might have doubts. Antonym, implausible.
Okay. Superficially believable, but maybe not solid.
Right. Credible implies worthiness of belief, often because the source is reliable or trustworthy. His story is perfectly credible to one who knows his background. Belief rests on the character or judgment of the source. Antonym, incredible.
So believable because of who said it or where it came from.
Exactly. Believable applies to what seems true because it fits within the range of possibility or known facts. Presented a play with believable characters. It aligns with reality or probability. Antonym, unbelievable.
Seems true because it's realistic or possible.
Yes. Colorable refers to something that seems true on its face or has just enough support to be argued for, even if it's weak. A theory supported by colorable evidence. It has a superficial appearance of legitimacy.
Just enough evidence to make it seem potentially valid, but maybe not really sound.
Precisely. And specious. This one stresses plausibility, but with a clear implication of deliberate deception or fraud. Specious piety. It looks good on the surface, but it's intentionally misleading underneath. Antonym, valid.
So, specious means deceptively attractive or plausible. It's a negative word, implying intent to fool.
Definitely negative. It's about a false front.
So for you, the listener, these are vital for critical thinking. Is something just superficially reasonable, plausible, trustworthy due to its source, Credible, consistent with reality, believable. Having a thin veneer of legitimacy, tolerable. Or intentionally deceptive despite appearances.
They help you question and evaluate the claims you encounter every day, essential skills.
Absolutely. Okay, how about words for abundance? Profuse, lavish, prodigal, luxuriant, lush, exuberant.
Right, all meaning more than enough, but with different connotations about restraint, waste, richness, or vitality.
Let's start with profuse.
Profuse implies pouring forth without restraint, like a stream. Uttered profuse apologies suggests an uncontrolled, perhaps overwhelming outpouring. Antonyms: spare, scanty, scarce.
Like a flood of apologies. Okay. Lavish.
Lavish suggests unstinted, unmeasured, often extravagant profusion, a lavish wedding reception of obvious expense. Implies great generosity, often bordering on or crossing into extravagance. Antonym: sparing.
Very generous. Possibly over the top.
Yes. Prodigal implies reckless, wasteful lavishness that threatens to exhaust resources. Prodigal spending exhausted the fortune. This is strongly negative, emphasizing wastefulness. Antonyms: parsimonious, frugal.
The prodigal son spending wastefully. Got it.
Exactly. Luxuriant suggests a rich, splendid abundance, often used for growth. The luxuriant vegetation of a tropical rainforest focuses on richness and visual splendor.
A rich, thick, abundant growth.
Yes. Lush suggests rich, soft luxuriance, maybe at or just past its peak. Nude portraits that have a lush, sensual quality. Implies ripeness, richness, often with a sensory, perhaps slightly decadent feel.
Ripe, rich, maybe voluptuous abundance.
That captures it well. Finally, exuberant. This implies marked vitality, vigor, or creative power behind the abundance. A fantasy writer with an exuberant imagination, it focuses on the energetic source producing the abundance. Antonyms: austere, sterile.
So the abundance comes from a place of energy in life.
Yes.
Okay, for you listening, describing a lot has layers. Is it pouring out uncontrollably? Profuse. Generous to extravagance, lavish.
Wasteful, prodigal, rich and splendid, luxuriant, ripe and sensual, lush. Or produced by vitality, exuberant.
It lets you qualify the nature of the abundance, not just the quantity.
Very useful. Now let's look at lying down positions. Prone, supine, prostrate, recumbent.
Right. All mean lying down, but they specify the orientation and often imply something about the person's state.
So prone means lying with the front of the body towards the supporting surface. Face down. Push-ups require the body to be in a prone position. Antonym: erect.
Face down. Simple. Supine.
Supine means lying on one's back, face up. It often suggests inertness or passivity, lying supine upon a couch.
Face up. Maybe relaxed or helpless.
Can be either, yeah. Prostrate implies lying full length, often due to submission, defeat, exhaustion, or collapse. A runner fell prostrate at the finish line, lying flat out, often on the ground.
So overcome, defeated, or collapsed. Lying flat.
Exactly. And recumbent implies lying down comfortably at ease in repose. He was recumbent in his hospital bed, just resting comfortably in a lying position. Antonyms: upright, erect.
Relaxed, lying down.
Okay, so again, for the listener, specifying how someone is lying adds detail. Face down, face up, supine, flat out from collapse, prostrate, resting comfortably, recumbent.
The word choice paints a vivid picture of their state.
It does.
Let's tackle punishment. Punish, chastise, castigate, chasten, discipline, correct.
Okay, all involve inflicting a penalty for wrongdoing, but they differ in method, severity, publicity, and importantly, purpose.
Starting with punish, the general term.
Punish is the broadest. It just implies imposing a penalty for a violation or wrongdoing. Punished for stealing. Antonyms: pardon.
Basic consequence for bad behavior. Chastise.
Chastise can mean either physical punishment or severe verbal censure. Chastised his son for neglecting his studies. It can be spanking or a harsh telling off.
Physical or verbal reprimand. Okay. Castigate.
Castigate implies a severe, often public, verbal lashing. An editorial castigating the entire city council. It's harsh public criticism.
A very strong public telling off.
Yes. Chasten suggests affliction or trial that leaves someone humbled and subdued, but ultimately improved. A stunning election defeat that left him chastened. The punishment leads to positive growth or humility. Antonyms: pamper, mollycoddle.
So punishment that teaches a lesson and makes you better.
Ideally, yes. Discipline implies punishing specifically to bring or keep someone under control, to train them. The duty of parents to discipline their children. The focus is on control and training behavior.
Punishment for control or training.
Right. And correct implies punishing with the aim of reforming the offender. The function of prison is to correct the wrongdoer. The goal is rehabilitation.
Punishment aiming to fix the person or their behavior.
Exactly.
So for you listening, when talking about punishment, think about the intent and method. General penalty, punish. Physical, verbal, reprimand, chastise. Harsh public criticism, castigate. Humbling lesson, chasten. Training for control, discipline. Or aiming for reform.
Correct. It clarifies the purpose behind the consequence, which is often crucial.
Absolutely. Okay, last group. Words for being mentally baffled or disturbed. Puzzle, perplex, bewilder, distract, nonplus, confound, dumbfound. We've all been there.
Yes. These describe different shades and intensities of mental confusion.
So puzzle.
Puzzle implies encountering a specific problem that's hard to solve or understand. A persistent fever which puzzled the doctor. You're faced with a question or difficulty.
Trying to figure something out.
Right.
Simple confusion.
Right. Perplex adds a layer of worry or uncertainty, especially if you need to make a decision. An odd change of personality that perplexed her friends. You're confused and troubled or unsure.
Confusion plus anxiety or indecision.
Yes. Bewilder stresses a confusion of mind, often from too much information or complexity that hampers clear thinking. The number of videotapes available bewilders consumers. Overwhelmed and unable to process clearly.
Information overload confusion.
Kind of, yeah. Distract implies agitation because your attention is pulled in conflicting directions. A political scandal that distracted the country for 2 years. You can't focus because of competing concerns. Antonym. Collect one's thoughts.
Attention scattered. Unable to concentrate.
Exactly. Nonplus implies bafflement so complete it causes total mental blankness. She was utterly nonplussed by the abrupt change in plans. You're just stopped. Unable to react or think.
Completely stumped, mind goes blank.
Yes. Confound implies temporary mental paralysis caused by shock, astonishment, or deep embarrassment. Tragic news that confounded us all. You're stunned into inaction.
Overwhelmed by shock, can't think or act.
Right. And dumbfound suggests an intense but momentary confounding or astonishment that leaves you speechless. Dumbfounded by her rejection of his marriage proposal. Shocked into silence.
Momentarily speechless from shock.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, so for you listening, next time you're confused, be specific. Trying to solve a problem, puzzle. Confused and worried, perplexed. Overwhelmed by complexity.
Bewilder.
Attention scattered, distract. Mind totally blank, nonplus. Stunned into inaction, confound. Or shocked, speechless, dumbfound.
It's a whole spectrum of mental states. From mild confusion to complete shock, our language captures it all.
It really does. Wow, what a journey through just a few sections of a dictionary.
It really was something, wasn't it? We've seen how words that seem so close can carry such distinct meanings, each offering a unique lens.
Yeah, from the subtle ways we talk about peace to the very specific kinds of punishment, or even those shades of mental confusion we just covered. The richness is incredible.
And understanding these nuances, it's not just about, having a bigger vocabulary. It's about clearer thinking, clearer communication.
Understanding more deeply what you read and hear, and being able to express your own thoughts with much greater precision.
Exactly. You start to see the power held within these lists of synonyms. They aren't just alternatives, they're different tools for different jobs.
Makes you really appreciate the craft involved in choosing the right word.
It does indeed.
So here's a final thought for you, our listener, to sort of mull over. We only scratched the surface today, just a slice of the alphabet. How many other everyday words that you use or that you hear all the time might be holding surprising, specific meanings, just waiting for you to discover them?
Yeah, what other nuances are hiding in plain sight, subtly shaping how we understand things without us even noticing?
Maybe that's a prompt for your own little linguistic deep dive sometime.
Could be fascinating.
Always more to explore. Thanks so much for joining us on the deep dive.